Kevin, is there anything that happened against Western Kentucky or just the overall proficiency, explosiveness, offensive and defensively that you think matters going toward this one?
I think it was important that Ohio State was able to show what it could do against a passer like Austin Reed and a receiver like Malachi Corley. Uh, I already know that I've drawn the ire of a lot of Notre Dame fans, and that's fine, but I like Western Kentucky's receiver room over Notre Dame's receiver room. I like Sam Hartman over Austin Reed, but I think Austin Reed is a tremendous quarterback, and he's somebody that will be an NFL quarterback, in my opinion. But when you sit there and you look at Malachi Corley, there's not a lot of Malachi Corleys out there in the nation. So Ohio State's ability to get to him, I mean, maybe not necessarily with the sacks, and I certainly am hearing that left and right. Well, they're not sacking, but even yesterday at interviews, whether or not, I don't remember if it was Ryan Day or if it was Jim Knowles talking about getting back there and disrupting his rhythm. I mean, and that was really important. Now, with that being said, Notre Dame's offensive line is about 20 times better than Western Kentucky's. Joe Alt is a NFL first round pick type of guy at their left tackle. So I don't necessarily expect Ohio State to have the same kind of success in getting to the quarterback, certainly with four. But, I think that we saw a bit of a game plan of what Ohio State needs to do to limit the passing game. And then, on the flip side, I know I'm getting ahead to talking about Notre Dame more than Western Kentucky. I think that, Ohio State was able to do a good job of keeping Western Kentucky's run game in check, but we're also looking at a very different world. Audric Estime is not the type of player that's going to end up at Western Kentucky. Ohio State's going to have its hands full there. But as I'd said, probably on this show, certainly on other shows, the 63 points was all well and good for Ohio State, even if 14 of them being on defense. But the biggest statement was going to be made if Ohio State was going to be able to keep that offense in check, which it largely did.
I'll just chime in. I think what you heard the players talk about after the game and the coaches yesterday, Coach Day and Coach Knowles, was just how a game like that was important to build their confidence, to know that they are capable of playing lights out football. The first two games, there were just too many missed assignments, too many mental and physical breakdowns, I think, to say that this was a legitimate, national championship caliber team. I don't think a 53-point blowout of Western Kentucky necessarily affirms that or confirms that, but it does make you come away with the idea that this team is capable of much more than it showed in the first 2 weeks. And I think that you also had guys who are starting to grow into roles that, that fit their capability. And, the Ohio State's best players stepped up, and I think that was what was important. Jack Sawyer didn't have a sack, as a for instance, but he provided just relentless pressure and made it a miserable day for Austin Reed, the Western Kentucky quarterback. So when I look at it, I just thought that they put their best foot forward at the right time going into the first matchup showdown game of the season. They were playing lights out football, and you come away from Western Kentucky game feeling much better about the trajectory of this season, understanding that they certainly have not arrived yet. I think both these teams come into this game. They both have one Power 5 win, Ohio State over Indiana, Notre Dame over North Carolina State, both on the road. NC State to me looks like a 6-6, 7-5 team. Maybe Indiana to me looks like a 4-8 team. And so, what did that really prove? Not a whole lot. Both of them have to step up and play, at a higher level this week to win that game. We're going to see who accomplishes that. There are so many keys and so many matchups we can get into, and I know we've got a Notre Dame guy coming on here after 11:30 to kind of share that side of it. But to me, I came away feeling much better about Ohio State than what I'd seen the first 2 weeks.
Two basic ways to line up the matchups would be player versus player or position versus position that don't play in conflict against each other, quarterback versus quarterback, or you go the other way, who is going to be competing on the field against each other, offensive line, defensive line. The most obvious contrast would be the experience level of Sam Hartman, Kevin, and Kyle McCord, who is facing his first hostile environment. Our apologies go out to the faithful out there in Bloomington. First hostile environment, and Kyle McCord obviously played a much better game than anything we saw in the first 2 weeks last week. But Sam Hartman's played, he probably is the most experienced of any quarterback in college football at this point.
Yeah, I think you got to be excited to see what this guy does in his first matchup game. And he really has never played under the gun against a comparable opponent. Anytime he would have played against a ranked team previously, it would have been, in the fourth quarter with the game already decided. He never had to go in a moment of concern, for CJ Stroud. So he's in a spot here, and we're going to see how he responds and how, in the course of 2 years as the starter, he's got this year and next year, he might play in anywhere between 8 and 12 of these type matchup games against a top 10, top 15 opponent. And his legacy is going to be decided on how he performs in these games. The trajectory of this team's season is certainly going to be decided in part by what happens in this game. Last year, Ohio State got into the playoff in part because they beat Notre Dame early in the season and had that impressive non-conference win, such as it was, 21-10, over a Notre Dame team that ended up, I think, 9-4, I think was their final record after they won their bowl game. I look at it and I feel like there's going to be so much made of what he does in this game. I think the last two games, actually, he's played pretty well, Youngstown State and Western Kentucky, but this is obviously a much more difficult challenge. I mean, I'm watching the Notre Dame Central Michigan game here right now on Peacock, and number one, Javonte Jean-Baptiste for Notre Dame is a former Ohio State player, was a backup, and he has stepped right into a pretty good role on the defensive line. He's going to be coming, to take Kyle McCord's head off, literally or figuratively, not literally. And so, these guys from Notre Dame are going to be coming for him, and he's got to show the poise in the pocket to step up and get the ball out to Marvin Harrison and Mecca Igbukah, Cade Stover, and all these other athletes. So, he's going to have to deal with the pressure. He haven't seen anything like what's coming on Saturday between the crowd, the pass rush, the coverage, all going to be at a new level for this guy.
I tend to size things up like this, especially when we don't have many data points, but we know what the talent is on the field. And I certainly believe in recruiting rankings and mass volume. And I believe Ohio State's a decidedly more talented team, not significantly, decidedly. I don't think it's debatable. We go back to the quarterback position, and so I'm going to weigh probabilities. Kyle McCord could wilt under pressure. And when I say pressure, I mean emotional, mental pressure of the scene and the stage. Physical pressure, they all melt under physical pressure to some extent. Obviously, some quarterbacks are able to shrug off, a hit or shrug off a hand in their face and be able to concentrate and deliver the football, and they're just that good. But even Tom Brady, if he's sitting on his rear end, cannot beat a defense downfield. But my concern for Kyle McCord in Ohio State, and again, this is just conjecturing because we don't know what's between his ears, is when Sam Hartman, who's had 45 career starts, I don't know exactly what the number is, it's going to be something in that range. Let's say Ohio State gets pressure on him in the first quarter, and then Notre Dame figures it out. He's not going to hear footsteps, you wouldn't think, because of his experience. He's going to take each play as it is, and when he's got a comfortable pocket or reasonable protection, he's going to deliver and not be affected. As Kyle McCord, as a young player, if he gets pressure for 4 or 5 consecutive dropbacks and then the next one's clean, that he may start to get in his head. And then kind of fast forward that to the final couple drives of the fourth quarter. If this is a shootout and it's 45-42 and Kyle McCord's been slinging it all over the place, but he's got to score a touchdown, let's say they're down 4 with 2 minutes left, but he's thrown for 410 and 4 touchdowns. Well, he's going to be in his groove, obviously, and have that confidence that he can get it done. But if it's a slugfest and he's down 14-10 and they're only in the game because of the defense and he's thrown for $140 and he's at 45% completion percentage, then I'm going to somewhat question whether he's going to have the confidence to lead a team down the field in the final minute to get the job done.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that I've come to see through the years is whenever we think a game is going to be a slobber knocker and it's going to be 14-10, it goes the other way and vice versa. I go back to the 06 Michigan game. We all thought that was going to be, it was a couple of top 5 defenses, 1-2 in the nation, et cetera, et cetera. And, we get whatever it was, 40, 42, 39. I mean, so it's going to be, a physical game and a mental game, and just how does he respond? And if Kyle has to be a de facto leader as the quarterback, but who's going to be there to kind of pick Kyle up if he has his struggles? I mean, sure, you're going to get your coaching on the sideline, and you're going to have, Corey Dennis on the headset, and you're going to have all of that going on. But, we're going to learn a lot about what Ohio State 2023 is in this game, because there are going to be a lot of similar challenges, certainly at the end of the season. I'm not necessarily sold on Wisconsin yet, but they have a few more games before Ohio State has to go there and play at Camp Randall. Everybody seems to be in love with Penn State and its offense right now. I mean, granted, Penn State hasn't necessarily played a murderer's row either. I mean, very few teams have the kind of win out there that a Texas or a Florida State has. But I'm really interested, just from a subplot point, to see what Kyle's demeanor is. Does he come out like on fire, and does he have to get calmed down? I mean, how are his first throws? I mean, is he putting it right there in the window for his guys, or is he throwing high or throwing low? I mean, there's gonna be a lot with that. But what will certainly help all of that, and that is that the offensive line plays its best game, namely on the left side.
And that's where I was going to go next, Steve. Is that still the biggest concern, offensive line holding up?
Well, they did a little better last week. Josh Simmons, lots been talked about with him at left tackle, and he almost made it through the game without a penalty. I think he had a false start in the second half just to make sure that he still was able to keep his union card, there in the second half as an offender, a weekly offender. But in all seriousness, I think what Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, spoke to us after we did this show last week on Wednesday night, and he said he wanted to see his guys play with more violence. And I think everybody in Buckeye Nation was clamoring for that, given the patty cake nature of the first 2 weeks, where they were tentative and didn't seem to know who they were supposed to hit. Well, against Western Kentucky, they came out, moved people off the ball, rushed for over 200 yards finally, and, did a little bit better. Notre Dame's a little bit susceptible, I think. Of course, Navy, that's all they do is run the football. They ran it pretty well against Notre Dame, even though they didn't score any touchdowns. And a couple of the other teams that they've played have also had a little bit of a success against the Notre Dame defense. So I kind of look at it. We did a show yesterday, and this was kind of how I put it. On a scale of 1 to 10, with Sam Hartman running the offense for Notre Dame, so far through 4 games, given the caliber of their opponents, I'd say their offense is probably an 8.5. Really good, but we just don't know how great just yet. Ohio State's defense has played outstanding, and yet who have they played? Western Kentucky can throw it all over the field. Indiana and Youngstown State were playing offense from the fetal position. Please don't kill us. Please don't kill us. Please don't kill us. type things. So they weren't even tested in those two games. So I put the Ohio State defense at like an 8. So I think that's one hell of a matchup right there. When you put, the Ohio State defense against the Notre Dame offense, something's got to give on that. On the other side, I think the Ohio State offense probably like a 7. Just all the pieces haven't clicked in there. You think it can be great, but can they do it against a great opponent? I don't know, maybe 7.5. And I think the Notre Dame defense, to be completely honest with you, the first two games, Navy and Tennessee State, you kind of have to throw those away. There was a stretch in the NC State game where they were dominant, although they did give up about 24 points, I think, in that game. And then this past week, they gave up a couple touchdowns to Central Michigan. I put them about a 7 as well. I'd give the Ohio State offense just the slightest of edge. So in the two matchups, I'm giving the offense just the slightest of edges, and who can exploit that edge, and who can, or of the two defenses, who can overcome that edge and do enough to put their team in position to win the game. That's kind of how in my mind I've thought about it, knowing that neither team's played anybody yet.
All right, folks, as you can see there, Ohio State Notre Dame watch party on the main channel. So watch it with me, and we will take you through the Buckeyes and the Irish. In the meantime, get to BuckeyeHuddle.com with Kevin. The Big Me podcast, the tail of the tape released later. What time, Kevin?
Sometime on Thursday. I'm woefully behind on it. I've written about maybe a quarter of it, and I really kind of want to catch a little bit more. I mean, I haven't started the Central Michigan game. I want to see a little bit more of that, and then I'll put down. I have an idea. I have like a rough outline of what I want, but yeah, it's definitely going to be Thursday.
Steve on Bucknuts.com, 247 Sports. Any other appearances this week, Steve?
Well, I'll say I'm working on my game data page, which is kind of my big prediction counter to what Kevin does. And I haven't got one word really done yet. Usually I try and release it on Wednesday, but it'll probably be in the morning on Thursday, if not later tonight. The picks, I'm going to do picks on Thursday, and I was just jotting down here 6 games matching ranked teams this week. It's the most in a September Saturday. I think the rivalry weeks sometimes in November will have more, obviously, when a lot of the rivalries match up ranked teams. But the last time there were this many in a weekend in September was in 2006, when there were 7 games this same week 3, 4, whatever, in 2006, and I guess it would have been week 4, and so many great games. I want to get to a place at South Bend on Saturday and watch, some of these other games like Rutgers and Michigan. I mean, I don't think Rutgers is very good, even though they've, beaten Northwestern, Temple, and Virginia Tech. I mean, my God, what is that? 3 Power 5 wins for them already? Or no, Temple's not Power 5, but that's pretty good for Rutgers. But Michigan's kind of been a little bit wonky, so I want to see that. Plus, so many other great games. But as far as what else I'm doing, I will be doing a segment with Spectrum Sports. I'll probably air tomorrow on Spectrum News 1 is what they call it. And then I will be appearing on Channel 4 here in Columbus, the Big Ohio Football Show, 7:30 p.m. Friday night. They're doing a big preview of the game, and certainly I'll be on there. So those are my 2 big things right now.
Any facets of this game or any players for Ohio State that are either incoming transfer guys that we've seen play, but obviously this is going to be their first big game, or any under the radar guys that we could see breaking through and making an impact that aren't necessarily at the top of people's minds?